Okay, let's see if we get started here, guys. Hi, how's it going? Okay, hopefully you guys can hear me. I'll just obviously go back and check before I go any further, just to be sure that you can actually hear what's going on. So just let me check my stream for a wee second. Hi, how's it going? Okay, okay, it is working. Yes. Radio. Okay. So today, guys, we're going to be looking at, I think, one of our sort of last chromatic chords. And then we have the sort of fun task of figuring out what else you guys want to know. This is going way back. This is going back about maybe 2 months now, when someone last asked about, I know about chords, like, what chord 1 is, a C major chord or a G major chord or a D major chord, but I don't know much about chromatic stuff. So that opened up a whole series of classes just on chromatic harmony. So we've already looked at the secondary function chord, secondary dominance. We've looked at the Neapolitan chord. Last week, we looked at borrowed chords and altered chords. Today, we're going to be looking at augmented sixth chords and maybe diminished sevenths. But we'll probably leave the diminished sevenths, I think, till next week, because they're not really related that much to augmented sixth chords, to be honest. The only reason I'm putting the two of them together like this is because they're the only two left. If I show you guys the desktop view here, just what we have as regards chromatic harmony, we have basically, well, we've looked at the diatonic stuff before. That was a separate class, maybe around about February, I think we went through that. I think maybe even January. So diatonic harmony we've kind of done. Excuse me. Borrowed chords and altered chords we had a look at last week. Neapolitan chords, I think, was maybe the week before. And the week before that was the secondary function chords, all these guys in purple here. So we've only really just got augmented sixth chords to look at, and half diminished and fully diminished seventh chords. We probably will leave that, I think, to another class, because when I'm just looking at the augmented sixth chords here, they're going to be much easier than the diminished sevenths. The diminished sevenths, I think, require a little bit more care and attention. The augmented sixth chords are actually going to be quite straightforward if you adopt like a process of how to work out what they are and how to use them. So the diminished seventh chords, though, can be very subjective the way you hear them. They can be quite difficult to sort of understand what they're used for. Are they used for modulation? Are they used just to get you back to your key chord? Are they chromatic? Are they diatonic? There's a whole series of things. Are they half diminished, fully diminished? So there's quite a lot of subcategories to the diminished seventh chords. Whereas for augmented sixth chords, there's just augmented sixth chords. So we'll do the augmented sixth chords. Okay. So the handouts for this, guys, some of you may already know this. Sorry. That sounds ominous. Big click there. Some of you guys may already know that in my community, online community in Zendler, on my website, which is run by Zendler, the community's powered by Zendler, and my online courses are powered by Zendler. There's been some students have been getting in contact with me saying that the community, sometimes they have to keep refreshing the page to log in, or sometimes it kicks them out, and then they have to refresh and log back in again or whatever. So what I'm going to do is I've created, or just literally yesterday or the day before, when I kind of started creating a new community on Facebook. Okay, so the old community is still there. So the old community will still be there on my website for anybody who's looking for that. I think I've just changed the name to frequently asked questions, and it may be a bit more of a standalone thing in the future. Just anyone who keeps asking the same questions, I'll just say, that's a really good one. I'll do like a question for that in that part of the website, and it'll just live there forever. Whereas the new community that's opening up in Facebook, Top Score Music Academy Community, that's the name of it, Yeah, that's going to contain quite a few new things. Handouts being one of them. Like the handout you're seeing here in front of you guys, that's going to be there. All of my posts for Facebook, Instagram, and Facebook Reels, they're all going to be there. All of these live broadcasts, the links to them are going to be there. All of the links to the edited videos are going to be there. And all of the sort of 2-minute social posts summaries are going to be there. So it's going to be sort of like a little hub of everything living just off of Facebook on my Facebook community page. So you're more than welcome to go over there and join in. This is where I will be uploading everything. It might take me a week or two to get around to doing all of it because there's hundreds of handouts and dozens of videos at this stage. So I think it's because it may be that there's just too much that I'm putting into the online community. It wasn't designed to sort of hold the amount of stuff maybe that I'm trying to put into it and the number of links and things. So there just may be too much it's just too much. It's weighing the community, that the limitations of the software being sort of tested. Whereas with Facebook are massive. They can, easily take all the stuff I could throw at it. So that's where it's all going to be. If you're interested. So yeah, I'll send out a little thing as well during one of my other broadcasts, a little link to it once it's all ready to go. I'll show you guys. Actually, let me see if I can just show you where it's going to be. Make sure I'm not giving away anything sensitive. Okay, so I go to groups. I go to my group. There we go. Just get rid of all of this for a sec. There we go. Okay, so it's literally only been there like a day or two now. It's got only a couple of members and I'd have to sort of make a bit more effort to, tell people about it. So you're the first sort of live class that I've told anyone about this. So some people have already just sort of logged in and joined. That's great. Everything, there's nothing in events yet, but all the events for these lives are going to be in there. There's nothing in media, well, except for one picture, but all the links to my photos and videos and all the files are going to be up here. So it just means it's nice to have everything in one place and it's easy to find. And I think it was just getting a wee bit tricky just to locate everything on the website. So if you want to go over to Facebook, Top Score Music Academy Community, that's it. Okay, so it's literally just launched, so there's not much on it yet, but I'll be adding a lot to it. And of course you can say hello and get talk to other members and stuff. So it's very sort of chill at the moment. I'm hoping to keep it that way. Okay, so anyway, getting back into our augmented 6 chords. If we just zoom in for a wee second, you'll see that they've got 3 different types: Italian, German, and French. We're going to go through each one, but they're all very similar. It may look like you're dealing with 3 separate chords, but really you're dealing with only one chord and 3 different versions of it. Same chord, but just 3 different ways of writing it. It's like Neapolitan chord that way. The way you have your Neapolitan chord can be thought of as the flattened second, like this, D flat, F, and A flat in the key of C major. Or if you put it into first inversion, it's the Neapolitan 6th, because you've got a 6th between F and D flat there. The distance of a 6th between F and D flat. So 2 different ways of analyzing the same chord. Yeah, sort of a similar concept exists for augmented 6th chords as well. So it's actually even easier than I was talking about earlier, where you're dealing with a couple of different versions of the same chord, whereas with diminished 7th chords, there's going to be lots of different types that we have to look at. Half, fully, common tone. There's loads of different diminished 7th chord types. So let's jump in to our augmented 6ths. What is an augmented 6th chord? It's a chord that contains the interval in augmented 6th. I know that sounds, pretty obvious. Like, if you're talking something like a diminished 7th chord, it's going to contain a diminished 7th in it somewhere. If it's half diminished, it probably won't. But if a fully diminished 7th chord is going to have a diminished 7th, an augmented 6th chord is going to have an augmented 6th. So you can see that what we were talking about a few months back when we were looking at intervals, how important it is to understand intervals. A lot of students do it like music theory with ABRSM, the exam board, or Trinity, or London College of Music, or whatever. And they look at intervals and they look at the theory and they think, this is just, it really is just theory. And I'm not going to use any of this in actual practice. And you do. Especially things like theory, when you're looking at like a book of jazz chords or something, there's going to be so many chords that their names are going to be based off of the distance of the notes inside of it, the intervals. So the augmented sixth chord is obviously going to be a chord that has an augmented sixth, usually above its bass tone. Okay, so you can see here that if we were looking at these two, we've got an A flat and an F sharp. That is the interval of an augmented sixth. If you're not sure how to work that out, do go back over that. It's actually on one of my blog posts, intervals, and the video are all about it. It's all inside the same blog post. Go to the website, go to the blog, and just type in intervals, and everything about intervals will be in there, including how to calculate augmented sixths. So I'm not going to go through it all again because it's already there, and you can go through it at your own time. So the interval is usually between the minor sixth degree of the scale, or the so-called flattened sixth, if you want to think of it like that, and the raised fourth degree. So if you're in the key of C major, let's bring up actually the piano just so it's easier to see all this. If you're in the key of C major and you go up a minor sixth from C, you're going to land on that first note that you need, the A flat. Okay, so that's the first thing you should think of if you're in the key of C major. Go up a sixth and then flatten it. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Flatten that, or lower it, and you hit A flat. And then you're going to have an augmented sixth above that. This is an F sharp. There's your normal sixth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Augmented sixth. So A flat to F sharp, it can sound a little bit dissonant. And they both have this tendency to resolve outwards. So just like all flats, they want to continue, going down or progressing downward. The A flat wants to fall to G. And just like all sharps, they want to continue rising. So the F sharp here wants to rise up to G. So both of them are sort of resolving contrary motion to each other. They're going in opposite directions. And that means that whatever comes after this augmented sixth chord, in this particular key of C major, whatever chords comes after it should have G's in it. And the most obvious chord to use there is going to be chord 5. In the key of C major, your GBD chord. Okay, so it doesn't have to be chord 5, but it's the easiest one, logically to put in there, because obviously it's going to have those G's that you need. Okay? You could, for example, I suppose, go to a chord 1 second inversion or something. Yeah, so whatever it is, it needs to have the ability to have 2 G's to have that satisfactory resolution of all of this tension, all of this dissonance that you've introduced into the music. F sharp needs to resolve up, A flat needs to resolve down, and the most obvious chord then is going to be something with G's in it to do that. So they'll always resolve outwards, or at least they should feel like they're going. Like there's an expansion going on in the harmony. So augmented chords can be another type of predominant chord, a chord that comes before your dominant, your chord 5. In the key of C major, that's going to be a GBD chord. So if we go back to the other handout from before, you can see that there's a massive, if I actually draw it in, there's a huge amount of this, which is literally just predominant chords. See, everything in this red box, all of it just wants to go to chord 5. Those are all predominant chords. So everyone thinks of chord 1, obviously, as being the most important chord in whatever key you're in, well, if you're in the key of C major, then your C major chord is the most important chord. But as regards functional harmony, as regards chord progressions, it actually isn't, I think, as important as the dominant. The dominant is the most important because the dominant will get you to chord one. Chord one's usually, the last chord or the first chord, it's where you end up. But the amount of times you take twists and turns to get there is dependent on the pre-dominant harmony, and that's all of this. How do you get to chord 1 through chord 5? Well, then the most important thing is how do you get to chord 5? And there's loads of ways of doing it. You can go 4 to 5, 2 to 5, 1 C to 5, chord 6 to 5, actually. I should have had that in there as well. 6 can go to chord 5. And all your borrowed chords, borrowed chord 4, 2, and 6 can all go to chord 5. Your Neapolitan chord can go to chord 5. All your augmented sixth chords can go to chord 5 as well. So, there's loads of predominant harmonies. That's not, special at all. In fact, it's almost the norm. It's probably easier to think of chords that don't go to chord 5. And when I say don't, sometimes even the ones that I'm about to say don't go to chord 5, sometimes they do. Like chord 3 to 5 is not as common. 7 can go to 5 as well, but it's not as common. And 1 can obviously go to 5. 1 can go anywhere. So everything can go to chord 5, really. But some of them are far more important and popular than others, and some of them are very special, like these augmented sixth chords. They get you to chord 5 by a semitone. They like a really ultra smooth motion towards chord 5. Okay, so that's the first step then, is whatever key that you're in, first step is go up a minor sixth and you'll get the root of the chord, the lowest note of the chord that you're looking for. In this case, in your key of C major, you go up a minor sixth from C, you're going to land on A flat. That's the lowest note of your augmented sixth chord. And there is really, I'll say it, and I know people will start posting comments saying, no, this isn't correct. It's really the only one. I know there are others. I know, before anyone jumps in, I know that there are other augmented sixth chords based on other scale degrees, but they, guys, are super, super rare. I think there's one that's based on chord 2 that was in a Schumann piece once. You're talking maybe 1 in every 1,000 pieces of classical music. It's so rare to come across these things. So it's really not worth going into it, because, put it this way, out of all the pieces that I've ever studied, my PhD was on the conducting career of Hamilton Hardy, and I spent years looking through his orchestral conducting scores. I never found one, and he conducted everything, every orchestral piece you can imagine. There were some that came close, and you could, if you enharmonically spell the notes differently, you could think, okay, yeah, that's on a different scale degree. But it really needs to be quite strict when you're dealing with augmented sixth chords. It needs to be an augmented sixth. You can't just say, well, we'll call the A flat a G flat, and the F sharp will be a G flat, and then it sort of moves outwards, or different ways. No, it's not an augmented sixth chord anymore. Like G flat in the bass, G sharp in the bass here, and G flat up here. That's not going to be an augmented sixth. Okay, so it has to be exactly as it is, an augmented sixth chord. You have to be quite strict when you're giving something a name called the augmented sixth chord. If it doesn't have an augmented sixth, then it's a bit silly to be, calling it something different. So there were a couple of weird ones like that. But I wouldn't, get too worked up about it. If you go to Wikipedia, you'll see that there's a link in their articles on augmented sixth chords. They do talk about other versions of this chord, but super rare. This chord is rare enough as it is. So you're maybe talking like a couple of occasions you would hear it in a 20-30 minute symphony or something. So it's not that common to begin with. And then to start having really super, unusual versions of it. Yeah, we're not going to go there. We're going to keep it nice and straightforward. You guys are more than welcome to go there after this class. Once you understand augmented sixth chords, yeah, try finding more ones that aren't based on this very first point we're talking about, going up a minor sixth degree. yeah, see if you can do something different. See if you can find it on a different scale degree. But for our purposes, and for most of the most famous pieces of music you'll ever hear, you go up a sixth, make it a minor sixth by lowering it, and then you add an augmented sixth on top. In this case, an F sharp. And it wants to resolve out. If you're able to follow along with all of that, then you are, as I said before, hitting sort of top tier harmony for like grade 8 theory. So you kind of need to know about your scales and your intervals first, and then know about chromatic harmony and then how it works and how it functions first. And then you can start putting them into your own compositions and hearing them and seeing them in other compositions as well. Okay, so that's the first step. Let me just undo. Okay. Creating augmented sixth chords. Let's look at the German one first of all. We'll get to why they're called all of this later. In fact, yeah. It's a bit weird, but we'll look at it. Creating augmented sixth chords. Find the minor sixth of the key. A flat. We've already done that. Build a major triad on top of it. So A flat, C, and E flat. There's your A flat. There's your C. And there's your E flat there. Okay. Add the augmented sixth on top of this and you hit F sharp. That's what we were saying before about this being your augmented sixth. It is never going to be considered, in this example, that F sharp is not going to be considered a G flat unless you want to modulate the different key. Okay, so why is that? If we were to play that German augmented sixth chord, if you have that in your mind as an F sharp, sharps want to go up. Da-dum. Okay. If it isn't an F sharp, if you think of that now as a G flat, flats want to fall. Da-dum. Very different function to that chord. That's not an augmented sixth chord. That's an A flat dominant seventh chord. A flat, C, E flat, your normal triad with a minor seventh, the G flat, not an augmented sixth, so it's a G flat. So that's the dominant seventh in the key of D flat major. It's not an augmented sixth chord, so that's why it's sometimes hard to spot them in other starting positions, as I was saying earlier, because more often than not, when you see them, different versions, other versions of the augmented sixth chord, they're being used in that regard as, you know, modulating to a different key. So it's a great way of modulating to a distant key. If you're in the key of C major with no sharps or flats in the key signature, and you're looking to get to D flat major, which has B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat. So 5 flats there, B, E, A, D, and G. That's a heck of a modulation, moving from something with no sharps or flats to something with 5 flats. Okay, so it's not a closely related key at all. And the easy way to do that, the easiest, or one of the easiest ways to do it, would be using your augmented sixth chord. Because you could have it doing this, for example, say you're in C minor. And then you could do something like... yeah. E flat. So yeah, how did we get into the D flat key? We started off in C minor and now we're in D flat major. How did that happen? Well, yeah, you're using your augmented sixth. So if you're using it as an F sharp going up, it needs to go up. Exactly the same chord, but spelled differently. Now it's a G flat. And it needs to fall down. Da-dum. Yeah, so it's a nice way of being able to get into that key quite without having to think, what chords can I use? What sort of modulation can I use? How do I smoothly go from one key to the other? That's why these chromatic chords are great for modulating, for changing key to sort of very not unrelated completely, but very distantly related keys. From C minor or C major to D flat major is kind of a jump. Okay, so that's why it's important when you're talking about the inharmonic equivalent, changing this F sharp to a G flat, even though it's going to sound the same. There's no difference in sound. But the function of the chord is changed if you do that, because flats want to fall, so that G flat wants to go down to F, whereas the F sharp wants to go up to G. And that leads to a different harmony then. Yeah. Okay. Notice the use of the tonic note. Augmented sixth chords can help identify the key. Yeah. So that's C, for example. Da. Then you might hear. Yeah, so there's a couple of wee things to watch out for when you're trying to hear these chords, not just the chromatic movement going out, outwards and contrary motion, the flat going down, the sharp going up. Also look out for the tonic note itself. So it'll be buried in there somewhere. Okay, that's the German one. As I say, we'll get to why they're called German, French, and Italian in a minute. It's nothing to do with Germany, France, or Italy, but we'll get there. Okay, well, what's the difference then between the Italian and the German one? The Italian one, the only difference is you don't have the fifth that the German augmented chords have. Okay, so that's the only real important difference. Okay, there's no fifth. If we go back to the German one just for a sec, you'll see there's A flat, C, and E flat. That E flat here in the Italian one, that's replaced by another C, the tonic note again. So that's the only difference. We don't have the E flat. So here is the German one. Yeah, I suppose I'll do the full German, full harmonic one. Here's the Italian one. They both behave the same way. You'll find them in the same places in music. This, before chord 5, especially coming up to a cadence, like a perfect cadence. So they're in the same places. They behave the same way. They have most of the same notes. There's only one note difference, and yet it's got a different name. So this is the Italian one without the E flat. That's the German. That's the Italian. Okay, so A flat, C, C. If you're writing it out for 4-part harmony, you would double that C. You can't double any of the chromatic notes because they're chromatic, and doubling them would mean you would have to have them both resolving the same way. A flats are both going to go down to G, and F sharps are both going to go up to G. And you end up with what's called parallel octaves if you do that, and that's something you try to avoid when you're dealing with classical harmony. Okay, not so much in pop music and folk music and stuff, but definitely in classical harmony, like Baroque and classical period harmony. You want to try to avoid that if you can. Okay, so we're not really going to go too far into the sort of the reasons why these things exist, but they do. A flat, C, C, and F sharp. You're doubling the C because it's the the easiest one to double. It's the most logical one. It's the key that you're in as well. So doubling the tonic. That's the Italian one. Note the use of the tonic note in augmented sixth chords can help identify the key. Yeah, so if you're in the key of C major or C minor, you should hear that note in there. Or if you're in the key of C major. Yeah, okay. The French one, French augmented sixth chords don't have the fifth that the German augmented sixth chords have. Instead, the fifth is substituted again, just like the Italian one. It's substituted again. This time, however, instead of it being like just the same tonic note twice, like two C's, the French instead substituted for the fourth of the chord. So instead of the E flat, which is the fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they have a D in there. So it's a bit weird. There's a bit of a cluster in the chord. And then it goes to chord 5. If you did all three of them in a row, you should be able to hear the difference. German, French, Italian. Da da da. That's what I look out for. German, French, Italian. Okay, so those are the three types. You've probably, so the key now, if you've noticed that I did C major and C minor for all three of these, you'll probably notice that in a minor key there's less work. You know, you've already got the A flat and the E flat belonging to the key signature. In this case, it's C minor. So that again suggests, and it's correct to believe this, that these are more common in minor pieces, just like your Neapolitan, for the same reason. The accidentals that they're looking for, most of them can be found from the key signature. If you're in a major key, you have to alter all of them to get the right chord that you're looking for. In the key of a minor key, for example, there's really only that F sharp you've got to introduce, and everything else is fine. So yeah, it's something to watch out for, guys, and minor keys are far more common. Okay. Another wee interesting thing about the French one, guys, is if anyone has like heard like of Debussy and the sort of impressionist composers, hated that term, by the way, but it's what we give it, that sort of style of vague, almost dreamlike in some regards, like impressionism of the 1890s, based on the painting impressionist paintings of the 1870s. So the musical world takes a lot of influence from the other arts as well. So the impressionists, like Debussy, were interested in this thing called the whole tone scale. Now the whole tone scale, as the name suggests, is made up of nothing but whole tones, and there's really only two. If you start in C, you get if you add pedal, it sounds really dreamy. Oops, I shouldn't put in that G. Okay, that's your whole tone scale. And the other one then, if it was based on C sharp. Let's try that. So that's one, and then if I do the other one based on C, that's every note covered. You know, so there really are only two notes, two scales, two whole tone scales. If you think of one starting in C, the other starting in C sharp, because it doesn't really matter where else you start, because if it's all whole tones, it's all going to sound exactly the same no matter what your start and end note is. It's going to sound exactly the same. So if you start on D, for example, that's just the same as starting on C. If I just add a C to the bottom. So you've really just played the C whole tone scale, even though you may start on D and end on D. It doesn't really matter as much. So why is that important when it comes to the augmented sixth chords? Well, because the French augmented sixth chords uses quite a few notes that belong to that scale. So if I was to play those notes just in the key of C major here, you can see that the only ones we're missing really are the E and the A flat. Oh, sorry, the B flat. Because we have the A flat from the chord. Yeah, so we're missing the E and the B flat. And if I just fill in that top A as well. Yeah, there's your... So some of those notes, or all of those notes, belong to the whole tone. Nearly said pentatonic scale. They belong to the whole tone scale, and that's typical of French Impressionism. And here's the weird thing: is that French Impressionism in music didn't really come around until the 1880s, 1890s, with Debussy, L'après-midi d'enfant. And that's the sort of beginnings of it anyway. He wrote loads of pieces in the Impressionist style around the 1890s and into the 20th century. But augmented sixth chords go way back before then, even the so-called French one. So although it uses notes from the French Impressionism, the whole tone scale, which is used a lot in French Impressionism, you can't really say that's why it is called the French augmented sixth chord, because it existed before French Impressionism. So it's not as if one thing created the other. This was around for a long time beforehand. Now, why is it called this? I did a bit of research for you guys. Is it this? I think it is this. Harrison, 1995. I went to the Society of Music Theory and JSTOR, and I looked up the research here. Now, the research may have changed. I did highlight it, I hope. Yeah, so I don't have to read through everything. Okay. Yeah, this was what struck me. Considering the enormous influence Central European musicians have had on the development of modern music theory in North America, it is surprising to note the continuing presence in our discourse of an English theoretical quirk, the naming of the three augmented sixth chords. It turns out, guys, that John Wall Callcott, in A Musical Grammar in 1806 London, seems to have been the first to coin these terms. So it's an English guy who invented them, and they've been around before him. They've been around during the Baroque period as well, so a good century before this. So it's not as if he invented the chords. He just assigned names to them, coined the terms, and it's all sort of smacks a wee bit of Napoleonic wars and the sort of propaganda of the day. The laziness of the Italian one, the full, strong, bold, full harmonic tone of the German one, the sort of weak, weird sort of sound of the French one. These are all deliberate things that he did. He called them these names deliberately, to sort of, I think, being influenced by political events of the day. So yeah, stereotyping here, ethnic stereotyping. Yeah, the music of France, Italy, and Germany. This is what your man Callcott called. Cannot be illustrated in a smaller compass than by the use of these three chords. The feebleness of the French, compared to the elegance of the Italian and the strength of the German. That's all rubbish, guys. Okay, so the guy who invented these terms was using them because he wanted to reflect the politics of his time, Napoleonic wars and stuff. So it's utter rubbish, guys. There's nothing Italian about the Italian augmented sixth. There's nothing French about the French augmented sixth, and there's nothing German about the German augmented sixth. It's just these terms have stuck. Okay, so I was kind of relieved to have found that. I did when did I first come across this? 6 years ago. Okay. And I've saved it for you. No, I haven't saved it for you guys. But it was about 6 years ago when I first read this, came across this. I was wanting to know where the heck did these names actually come from, because so many books talk about them, so many theory books talk about them. It's in every single music degree course in the world. why do we call them Italian, French, and German? And most of the time, most people just say, well, it's just a name. That's all. It doesn't actually mean anything. It's not it's not only as if French composers use the French one, German ones use the German, Italian ones use the Italian. They all use different versions, and none of them were invented in these countries anyway. So, yeah, it seems to be something that came around in the English-speaking world. Ironically, there's an English one, but there's the Italian, French, and German. Yeah, so, yeah, it's a great wee article, that actually. It's heavy reading, guys, if you're not into sort of the theory side of things, Society for Music Theory. It is heavy reading, but for me, it just answered a lot of questions. Like, okay, we can now put it to bed that there isn't anything, about those countries at all in any of these chords. Okay, it's just an easy way of remembering them. For me, when I was looking at it, I was thinking, yeah, I know how to sort of memorize these now, because I'm thinking of the German one as being the fullest one, like the most harmonious one. It involves 4 completely separate notes. It involves triadic harmony, and it has like all notes that belong to the traditional German or traditional augmented 6th chord. It has the A flat major chord here, A flat, C, and E flat, and it has the augmented 6th, so it has full harmony. And to me, that sounds the way I'd expect the Germans, not that they do this, but it's the way in my mind I'd expect the Germans to behave harmonically, have full, strong harmonies. This is the nation, after all, that, all the world's greatest organ players and organ makers and harpsichord players, and the greatest piano makers as well for a long time before everything moved to London. This is where a lot of harmony and harmonic composers laid down the rules that we still abide by in music today. People like J.S. Bach and so on. So nearly every single city, town, well, not village probably, but every town and every city in Germany will have an organ and probably an organist to go with it. You can't really say the same thing in places like, Spain or Italy or even France. Germany, because of the wars of religion that were there in the 17th century, that there's so many different types of religions and so many different ways of everything from Lutheran churches to Calvinist churches to Catholic churches in the south. They've all got their own sort of traditions, and they're all got their own rich sort of traditions of organ playing and congregational singing. There's no other nation quite like that. So to me, it makes sense then that something that involves full 4-part harmony like this, that it's good. It makes sense for me, in my mind anyway, to assign the label of this is the German one, because this is what you would expect German music to be, full harmony. Whereas the Italians, in my mind, the guys who invented or perfected like the violin or opera singing, the melodic line, I suppose, yeah, they're less concerned with harmony, more concerned with beautiful melodic lines. I know this is extreme generalizations, but this is how I remember it. Yeah, so having theirs is just A flat, C, and F sharp. That makes sense, because these are the guys who invented perfected the violin and invented opera. So yeah, they're going to have the sort of the least congested harmony, I think, and focus more on the, what would you say, the horizontal rather than the vertical. The French one, as we've already seen, uses the notes from the whole tone scale for French Impressionism. But again, the chord has nothing to do with French Impressionism. It's just a coincidence. And it's nothing to do with France either. It's just a name that was given by an English guy in 1806 or 1805. So, but it still helps me remember. So it's like generalizations that help me remember what's the difference between each one. The German one is full 4-part harmony. The French one is thinner harmony to allow a bit of room to breathe as opposed to melodic lines. And the French one uses notes from the whole tone scale, which is typically used in a lot of French Impressionism, the whole tone scale. Okay, so that's the 3 of them. And, it's kind of underwhelming to find out that there's nothing German or French or Italian about any of them. And yeah, there's really only slight differences between them. Okay. I am not going to go into the Phrygian cadence, guys, until we look at that in a different class. So we will come back to this handout if you're wondering, well, if they weren't invented by the French, Germans, and Italians, where did this chord come from? That's a difficult history. Okay, so we'll just park that. I'm sorry. We'll be here all night, and we'll be veering off into the sort of dusty history of a particular chord. We don't really need to do that. Okay, so we will cover that in a different maybe blog or some blog post or something, but we'll leave it for tonight. It's going to be in the handout if you want to ever read about it and go into it in more detail. You're more than welcome, and I can give you other handouts about what we mean by Phrygian and Phrygian cadence and things. Yeah, I have loads of stuff on that. Okay, so we'll just leave the top two slides there. Why do we have why did the Italians and the French have a different version? Well, even though those guys, the Italians and French, didn't invent the chord, why do those different versions of the chord exist? Well, as I said, it's to avoid parallel fifths and octaves that you would get if you don't do it. You see, when you have like the full German one, the A flat, C, E flat, and F sharp, the distance between A flat and E flat is a perfect fifth. And if you move straight to chord 5, you end up with consecutive parallel perfect fifths. And you try to, as I said before, to avoid that. You try to avoid these parallel fifths and octaves in your classical and Baroque music because it kills the sort of independence that you're expecting in your harmony. It makes it very medieval, actually, when you start moving everything in fifths. You know, like... You know, that sort of... That's very medieval. So you don't want the Renaissance composers and Baroque composers and classical composers didn't want their music to sound really, really old-fashioned. So they avoided those parallel fifths and octaves movement. The Italians got round the problem just by not having the fifth in the chord at all. It's no E flat, it's just another C. This is why it's there. And the French got round the problem by just introducing an entirely new note, the D. We've already looked at that before. But the German ones are a little bit trickier because they have the full 4-part harmony. And what you have to do to avoid this consecutive parallel fifths is you should go to chord 1 first of all. Okay, so German augmented sixth chords tend to resolve to chord 1s and then go to chord 5. So you end up with this lovely sort of, you see, chord 1, that's your augmented sixth chord, chord 1, second inversion. So notice that this is going down, this is going up, and then it goes down to D. So there's no parallel fifths anymore. So that's why there's 3 different versions of this chord. 2 of them were a way of getting around it, you know, just by not having the fifth in the chord or just substituting the note for something else. But the German one then requires a little bit more care when you're using it. You've got to move to a chord 1. It's the reason why when you look at this chord from before, or this chord handout from before, you'll see that the German augmented sixth chord, the dotted line that comes out of it goes to chord 1, second inversion, a 1C chord. Okay, so it's the only one that should really go there. The French and Italians can go straight to chord 5. The German one tends to go to chord 1. Okay, so it's a little bit of an extra work to use that just to avoid those parallel fifths, those consecutive parallel fifths. If you don't do that, if you go straight from the German one straight into the chord 5, Mozart did that quite a bit and did it so often that it's called Mozart fifths. As the legend goes, I suppose. Mozart's allowed to, you're not. That's something that we have to tell our music students who are doing composition exercises for their theory exams. They're going to be introducing a lot of parallel fifths, and they said, well, I saw Mozart do it in his compositions. Why can't I? yeah, it's a valid question. So it's something to watch out for, that some composers break the rules. Mozart did that quite frequently. For the German augmented sixth chord, he just resolved it to chord 5 right away. But just to get rid of it, if you want to make it sound a wee bit smoother and abide by strict harmonic guidelines or rules, you should go to chord 1, second inversion, and then go to chord 5. And then you can go to chord 1 after that to resolve it. It's a perfect cadence. Okay. Yeah, so it's a little bit of extra sort of stuff there, just in case you're wondering, well, why is there 3 different versions of the same chord? That's why. Just to help you resolve them a bit easier. Okay. Some of the pieces of music that have this, I'm only going to play just a few of these just to let you guys hear it in a real piece. There's the Italian one. So it goes to chord 5 right here. Ooh, if I can draw around it. It's a wee bit thick, this pen, sorry. There we go. So that's your Italian one here. Your E flat, your C sharp is the augmented sixth. The C sharp goes up to D. The E flat goes down to D. You need to go to a chord that has D in it. And if you're in the key of G minor, as we're in, chord 5 is the most logical chord to go to. D, F sharp, and A. Even though it's just D, D, and F sharp, there isn't any A. It doesn't matter. You don't really need every note of the chord to make it valid. You definitely need the root, and you definitely need the third, and that's really about it. So everything else, though, is just very standard chord progressions. Chord 1. Probably 2. 1. 5. The Italian. It's a very nice wee piece that does it quite a bit. Also, the next one. Oops. Why is my pedal not working? Oh, there we go. And then here's your French one. Pathétique. Da dum 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 da 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 da. French. Chord 5. And you're in E flat major this time. Yes, that's the French one there. Beethoven, of course, was not a French composer, but it's just to show you that. And this is during the Romantic era, around the time these names were actually just being invented for these chords, but they've been around for a long time before that. Okay. This last one, what is this actually? Oh my goodness. The German augmented sixth chord with that many sharps, you're going to have A sharp, E, and C. That is fun. Oh my goodness. So that is one hell of a... Kind of an awkward one actually, because it feels like a dominant 7, like C, E, G, B flat. We do have the C, we do have the E, we do have the G, but the B flat is the A sharp. If you had written B flat there, you would have be a way of getting from E major into F major, or even more impressive, getting into F minor, moving from something with 4 sharps, E major, to something with 4 flats, F minor. So that would be a heck of a modulation to use that chord. But here we're just going to treat it as A sharp. to chord 5. So it starts with... Yeah, it's got a nice sort of descending chromatic thing there. Yeah, so that's the German one. Loads of examples of this in music everywhere, but I just picked the 3 sort of easiest ones anyway, that I sort of hear them individually. Okay. There's loads of others actually there as well. There's Schubert Impromptu. That would have been nice actually. And Puccini La Boheme. French one in there anyway. Now, if I was to build on the minor second, I'm not going to do it. I know there's other augmented sixth chords. No, we're not going to look at them. This is one of the few examples, as I said, where there is like another version of it, and a different, like, where you're not basing off the minor sixth. So, as I say, there's so few of them, guys. It's far more important, especially if you're doing like theory, grade 8 theory, or if you're just interested in harmony and how it works and how music works and how to sort of get from one distant key to another. And it's more important just to get the German, French, and Italian versions, the standard versions of those, because they're far more frequently used. They're not even that much. They're not even used that much to begin with. But when they are, it's going to be those versions, the normal standard German, French, and Italian. None of these ones built on different scale degrees are that common. Like, I know Puccini La Boheme is one of the most famous pieces of music ever, but still, it's rare that you're going to come across those chords. Okay. Oh, the others are just to do with modulation. We're going to look at modulation as a different thing, guys, a different topic someday, like how to change key, because I want to show you guys how to do that, you know, just for standard, like if I want to go from C major to G major, you know, or C major to F major, or C major to A minor, you know, closely related keys, easy keys to get into, very easy keys to change to. That's more important, and we'll do that first, and then we'll look at how you use all these different ones, all these chromatic chords that we've been looking at. We'll deal with all those in a separate class, so I'm not going to split it up here and just look at the, you know, the augmented sixth chords and modulation. We'll look at it with all the others together, so it makes more sense. Okay, radio. Well, let me see, is there any other things for the augmented sixth chord? I don't think so. I think those are the main handouts. If you're looking for examples of this in the pop world, usually the Beatles are the good place to go, the best bet anyway. Most of their music and the pieces that they wrote will have either secondary dominants in them, or borrowed chords, or altered chords, the Neapolitan chord, or augmented sixth chords. You know, because they took extreme care for a lot of their compositions, which is what makes them one of the most highly rated rock bands of all time. It's because they, you know, took great care in their compositions about what they were using, and took advice from other people as well about when to introduce certain things and how to introduce them. So yeah, that's what gives their music like a sort of quality, an elevated quality compared to all the other stuff from the same era. It's because they're using all of these tricks, all this knowledge. Okay. So yeah, I won't save any changes because I've been drawn all over it. So we had a wee look-see there, guys, just at the augmented sixth chords. So just to recap, this is what it is. If you're in the keys, whatever key that you're in, let's say C major, go up a minor sixth. This is the main way of doing it. Okay, go up a minor sixth, and whatever note that you land on, build a triad on that. In this case, if you're in C major and you go up a minor sixth, you're hitting A flat. So that's going to be your starting note for the whole chord. Build a major chord on top of that, A flat, C, and E flat, and then add your augmented sixth on top of all of that, which is the F sharp. F sharp is an augmented sixth above A flat. And that should be in all 3 versions, F sharp to A flat, F sharp to A flat, because all 3 of them, even though they're different to each other slightly, all three of them are still called augmented sixth chords. So you need an augmented sixth chord for that to make sense. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing then is that they nearly always resolve to chord 5, coming up to a cadence, except for the German one, which often resolves to chord 1 to avoid those parallel fifths. And when it doesn't do that, we sometimes call those fifths Mozart fifths, because Mozart did that quite frequently, apparently. I've yet to research that just to see, is that just a legend or an urban myth or something, but yeah, apparently I've seen it a few times in a few different books, and they might all be quoting the wrong thing, but I didn't do the research into that. I'm just looking at what textbooks have been saying for years. Mozart fifths. Okay. And they're more common in minor keys. That'll be the third thing, because in the key of C minor, for example, you've already got the A flat and the E flat built into your key signature, so you don't need to alter those notes like you would in a major key. A flat and E flat here, for example. Okay, so yeah, that was great that we managed to get through that in just under, well, just over an hour, because it is tricky doing this for the first time when you're trying to learn these for the first time. So if you guys have any questions about this, the community's the place to come to. Come on over and join. And if you want to know more about any of this stuff, do let me know. If you want me to explain it a different way or find a few examples you could play, or how would you put it into your own compositions, basically any questions that you have about the music side of things, do come over and let me know. Okay, and I'll do my best to help you. As I say, if I don't know, guys, I will say I don't know, but I'll find out. Okay, so I'm usually pretty good at finding stuff out. Okay, so let me see. For next week, we'll be looking at the diminished seventh chords. So that will be our last sort of farewell. That'll be our farewell to chromatic harmony, guys. Will be the diminished seventh chord, the fully diminished, the half diminished, and the common tone diminished. We'll be looking at all three versions of it, and the sort of chromatic and diatonic versions of those chords as well. So, if there's anything else that you guys would like me to look at, any questions that you have about music, or we can circle it all back to trad music. If there's any questions you have about the harmony and trad Irish traditional music, or which resources would be helpful, which resources would I recommend if you're looking to learn something, or if you want to buy a particular book, or if you want to download a particular app, what software or hardware should you be getting? Any questions at all, now is a good time, because we're coming to the end of one massive topic here, which is chromatic harmony, and I always throw this open to you guys until someone emails me or says something in the chat. Can you tell me a bit more about this? So yeah, it's up to you guys, what you would like to see next. So get your answers in, get into the community and start sending things to me, and emailing me and saying, I want to know more about this, or can you help me with this? Yeah, that's what we'll do. Alrighty go. So we'll leave it there for tonight, guys, and thanks very much for coming, and this should be up and running within the next few days on YouTube, and I shall see you guys again next week. All the best.